Everybody, this is Daniel Troutman, one half of the tag team Bothersome Truth, and I'm doing another episode of this show because with this show that I'm doing, it's a little different than the tag team shows that Emmanuel and I do every week with Bothersome Truth. I wanted to kind of dig into some stories that I feel like are often ignored or not given proper attention during the week because there's so much going on in the world. So I just want to highlight like three stories today and just talk about them briefly because I think they're important and tell you why I think they're important. So the first story I want to talk about is the shooting that happened in North Carolina. This was with a man named, now I'm going to look at this a little bit because I want to get the names right, Chad Copley. He was a North Carolina homeowner and a neighborhood watch member. And there was a young man outside named Corin Rodney Bernard Thomas. And so him and his friend were out at a party that night. They had some weed on them. We're going to come back to that. But they hadn't committed any crime. They were unarmed. They didn't do anything wrong because they were going to a party. They found out there weren't a lot of females there, so they decided to leave the party. And they saw a cop car. They thought they were going to be in trouble for the marijuana they possessed. And so they took off running, okay? And they realized that they were fine. Nobody was chasing them. Well, Copley sees them and assumes that they're armed. And so he calls 911. And I have a link in the comments. You can read the story where he's saying they have guns. They're threatening us. I'm going to do what I need to protect my property and my neighborhood. And so he ends up shooting the young man from his garage. Okay. Now he said he was given a warning shot, but for some reason the warning shot went into the young man who was 20 years old and the kid is dead. So now Copley has been charged with murder for how he handled the situation. And there's just a few quick things I want to tease out here. You can read more in the story. This is more of a quick highlight. The first thing is that stories like this, in my opinion, show one of the issues we face when it comes to race. And that is the conversation about implicit biases that everyone has. Now, just to be clear, everyone has biases. Everyone. And some of our biases are important. Some of the rapid assumptions that we make can save our lives. If you're walking past a dark alley and you see some figures in the shadows and you feel like your safety may be in jeopardy, assuming that can save your life instead of sitting there and trying to do a math equation about whether you're going to be safe or not. So I'm not saying that all biases are bad. Some of our biases are based in probabilities and facts, okay? What I'm saying is, what I want to get to specifically is that we also have racial biases. If we just kind of look at all the different biases we have and just pull one of them out when it comes to race, and all different races have biases about other races. They have these prejudices about other races, and it's up to us to be intelligent and reasonable so that we don't act on them when there's no evidence to support them. I say that because I think Copley had this bias when it came to these young black men because he called them hoodlums. He assumed that they were armed and he killed one of them. The reality is this kid was unarmed. This kid had not threatened him. This kid had not come on his property. This kid had done nothing wrong. We have no evidence that this kid did anything wrong. We have evidence that Copley called the dispatch 911 multiple times and that he was already hostile. You can hear it in the calls. And as a result, this kid is dead. Now, some of you heard me say weed and then you just stopped listening for a few minutes because you were like, oh, black kid with weed, whatever he did, he deserved it. No, that's not true. The fact that he had marijuana on him was a mistake because it's not a legal substance, although there are many who believe that it should be. But I do think this is an opportunity to just briefly mention that the war on drugs has not worked. It has ravaged communities, particularly the black community. We know that it was created to do that because Nixon's personal aide said that he was one of the ones who crafted the campaign. And he said that was the goal of the war on drugs, to destroy black communities and those who opposed the Vietnam War. So here we have a situation where the kid is afraid of getting in trouble for marijuana, so he runs, which plays into the entire situation where he's killed. And so I just think it's important because this is one of those things that'll get ignored, that this is all the more reason why we need to have a conversation in this country about why we have actually made things illegal. Do we do it because there is a noted public health concern with data to support it, Or is this just tradition? Or is this because there are corporations that would rather us take pills than use herbs and minerals? I don't really know where I am on this. I just know that I don't like more laws. I prefer less laws because laws get used against people, particularly people in the black community. But I just think those are some things that are really important to mention. Second story I want to cover real quick is the Baltimore report that came out today by the Department of Justice. They came out with a report. They did a year-long study saying that basically the police department in Baltimore is horrific. They were violating black people's constitutional rights. They were using lethal force and excessive force without justification. They were escalating common issues into ones that necessitated violence. Little to no accountability. You've heard all this before. Yet, this is the same Baltimore where Freddie Gray was killed and all 6 officers got off. Acquitted, mistrials, not guilty, all of them. In fact, if you read Vox, and the Vox link is in the comments, Vox even says that the cops were trained on transportation policies to prevent a Freddie Gray type situation. This is why so many people such as myself believe that we have a police problem in this country when it comes to accountability. Okay? We don't have accountability. And the Baltimore report proves that. The Ferguson report proves that. So how many reports do we need before people realize we have a problem? This story matters because this was a year-long study by the Department of Justice. So when people tell you, oh, we don't have any systemic problems in this country with the police and a lack of accountability and the use of force, we don't have any problems when it comes to these issues. These are just a few bad apples. The Baltimore report showed that there were only a few good apples. That because of the policies, most cops were violating people's constitutional rights. So this is another tool in your kit when you're having a conversation with someone about racial injustice, when you're having a conversation about systemic racism and institutional racism and how it manifests itself in the police system, you can point to this report and say, hey, you can argue with me all you want, but here's the report. So what are you going to do? Tell me that the Department of Justice was wrong? They may do that anyway because some people think facts are optional. But there is a gentleman who has been trying to speak out on these issues, and he was actually suspended for 90 days. And I want to touch on this story as well. This is Judge Olu Stevens in Louisville, Kentucky. So here's what happened with Judge Stevens. Judge Stevens is, as you can tell, a judge in Louisville, and he started having public comments and conversation with one of the top prosecutors because he kept noticing that the juries were all white and the suspects were not always white. That you had black suspects and all white juries. And at one point he dismissed the jury because he said, stop, you're picking all white juries. This is not a fair representation of the demographics in this community. And he was making public comments about it. He was criticizing the prosecutor. He criticized the public defender. And he was doing this. He even criticized some victims. That was really interesting. He criticized some victims because they were the victims of a robbery. And the burglars were black. And the victims were talking about how they were having a conversation about how they've been talking about this to their 5-year-old. And Judge Stevens said, hey, you shouldn't be talking to your 5-year-old about this the way that you're doing it because not all black people are like this. He even said, if the perpetrators were white, would you be having the same conversation? Which is a fair question to ask, but maybe not by the judge. So he was suspended for 90 days. He's been investigated as a result of this because there was belief that he's not appearing to be impartial. And I have a few thoughts on this because I kind of come in the middle. On the one hand, I actually agree that our judges need to both rule unbiasedly and also appear unbiased. Now, do I think that all judges are unbiased? No, of course not. But I hope as many are that can be. But it also does matter that the judge appears biased too, unbiased. Because if they appear to be biased, then that is also going to cause concern for those who want to find justice through the legal system. Now, some of you don't even think there can be justice, but I'm not talking about that right now. That's a whole nother conversation and video. So when it comes to this issue, the first thing is his comments made it where he didn't appear to be unbiased. And so I understand why they went that route that they did. On the other hand, I actually applaud him for speaking out, because if there's one thing that bothers me in the judicial process is when we have an all-white jury and the suspect is Hispanic or Korean or black, whatever their race is. We need to have juries that represent the peers in the community. And when we kind of select these juries, it's not done by accident. I hope you don't think that the prosecutor just couldn't find anyone else in the jury. The prosecutor knew what he was doing. He selected that jury because he's a prosecutor. It's his job to get the prosecution, to win the case. So he believes that this is going to help him in his strategy. I know a little something about legal work because I study it and I've had jobs that are related to the legal field. So that's part of his strategy. And Judge Stevens is saying, hey, stop it, because you're actually hindering the pursuit of justice by doing this. So I actually applaud Stevens, because I think Stevens was right to see that this is an issue and want to address it. I don't know for sure that that was the proper way to do it with public comments when you're a judge, but I'm glad Judge Stevens was trying to do something. And if nothing else, then Judge Stevens could take a look at, okay, what do I do going forward so I can still address this issue without doing it in a way that kind of violates the terms of the position that I hold. So I wanted to cover those three stories because as you can see, every story had a racial viewpoint, and of course they do. I'm black, and I'll never forget as a young child my mom teaching me that there was a difference in how I was going to be treated by people because I was black. And my mom, what she said to me that I never forgot, and I carry with me, hence being involved with Black Lives Matter, wanting to be an activist, but also one that really understands the history and the best strategies and policies and laws and these things, is that my mom said, I'm not teaching you to hate anyone. She said, but I'm teaching you to be aware. And so I share these stories with you because we need to be aware that it is not the same life experience for everybody, that not everybody gets treated the same based on the color of their skin or their gender or their class standing or where they live or their nationality or their religion. But for me, being a black man, I know that I'm not treated the same because of my race. And it's not my position to be angry with people and yell at them and those things, but I want to bring awareness to it. I want to educate and say, hey, this is what it's like to see the world through the eyes of a black man. I don't see the world the same way you do, and you may not see the world the same way I do, but understand that the world is different for me because I'm black, and here's why. So that's why I cover these stories. That's in part why I'm doing this show. I'm also doing it because I want to get feedback from you. Do you agree with the viewpoints I had on these different stories? Do you disagree? If you disagree, tell me why. Respond in the comments. No matter where you see this video, respond on the YouTube page with the comments, because that helps us with our show. And it's easy for me to get there and respond to your comments and think about what you say and read them. And if you like it, click like. If you're new to what we're doing, we appreciate if you subscribe, if you love what's happening here. And that is Daniel with The Bothersome Truth, and I will see you next time.